tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The night everything changed. The sterile hospital lights hummed overhead as Clinton Garrett sat beside his 8-year-old son Jimmy's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of the boy's chest. The machines beeped rhythmically, the only sound breaking the suffocating silence of the pediatric ICU. Jimmy's small face was pale against the white pillows, his body broken for what everyone called an accident. Clinton's weathered hands, scarred from 20 years of construction work, trembled as he brushed a strand of hair from his son's forehead. At 42, Clinton had built an empire from nothing, starting with a single hammer and ending with Garrett Construction, the most respected building company in 3 counties. But all his success meant nothing now. Mr. Garrett? Dr. Patricia Reynolds approached, her expression grave. Clinton had known Patricia since high school. They dated briefly before he met Andrea. Her medical coat couldn't hide the sympathy in her eyes. "I need to speak with you." Clinton stood slowly, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow over the small bed. His steel gray eyes, which had intimidated countless business rivals, now held a father's desperation. "How bad is it, Pat?" She glanced around, ensuring privacy. "The internal bleeding is severe. We've done everything we can, but—" She paused, struggling with the words. "Clinton, I don't think Jimmy will survive the night." "I'm sorry." The words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Clinton's jaw clenched, his hands forming fists. He'd survived poverty, built a fortune, and crushed anyone who stood in his way. But he couldn't fight this. "Where's Andrea?" Dr. Reynolds asked gently. Clinton's expression darkened. His wife of 12 years had been acting strange lately, distant, secretive. When the call came about Jimmy's accident, she'd seemed almost relieved. Then, 2 hours ago, she'd simply vanished. As if summoned by their conversation, Andrea Garrett appeared in the doorway. At 36, she retained the beauty that had first caught Clinton's eye at a community college dance. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite the circumstances. She wore an expensive dress, one Clinton didn't remember buying her. "Clinton," she said, her voice oddly flat. "I need to talk to you." Dr. Reynolds excused herself, leaving the couple alone beside their dying son. Andrea didn't even glance at Jimmy as she spoke. "I can't do this anymore," she said, checking her phone. "This whole situation, it's too much." "Situation?" Clinton's voice was dangerously quiet. "Our son is dying, Andrea." She shrugged, the gesture chilling in its callousness. "These things happen. Look, I've already made arrangements with Morrison Funeral Home. Bury him cheaply. I won't be attending." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Clinton stared at his wife, trying to process what he'd just heard. In 12 years of marriage, he'd seen Andrea's selfishness, her materialistic nature, but this— "What did you just say?" Andrea was already backing toward the door. "I'm leaving, Clinton. Don't try to find me. And don't expect me to waste money on an elaborate funeral for a kid who was probably going to amount to nothing anyway." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Clinton stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of her betrayal. His wife, the mother of his child, had just abandoned their dying son with instructions to bury him cheaply. Hours later, Clinton sat alone with Jimmy as the boy's breathing grew shallower. The doctors had done what they could. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Clinton held his son's small hand, whispering stories of construction sites and fishing trips they'd taken together. "Dad!" Jimmy's voice was barely a whisper. Clinton leaned closer. "I'm here, buddy. I left something for you." "Important." Jimmy's eyes struggled to focus. "My socks. Check my socks." Before Clinton could ask what he meant, Jimmy's eyes closed, and the machines began their final, devastating song. 2 hours later, Clinton sat in the hospital's family room, numb with grief. The funeral director had been contacted, arrangements made. Jimmy's body had been taken away, but not before Clinton had honored his son's final request. Removing Jimmy's small socks in the privacy of the hospital room, Clinton had found something impossible, a small brass key, no bigger than his thumb, taped carefully to the bottom of Jimmy's right foot. With it was a tiny piece of paper with Jimmy's careful 8-year-old handwriting. Use this to unlock what's inside. Now, staring at the key in his palm, Clinton felt the first stirring of something other than grief. Questions. How had Jimmy gotten this key? What did it unlock? And why had his son, in his final moments, made sure Clinton found it? The key was warm from his son's skin, and engraved on one side was a small number, 247. Clinton turned it over and over, his builder's mind analyzing its construction. This wasn't a house key or a car key. This looked like it belonged to a safety deposit box or a locker. As dawn broke over the hospital parking lot, Clinton Garrett sat in his truck, staring at the key that his dying son had somehow hidden from everyone, including the medical staff who'd examined every inch of Jimmy's broken body. The boy had been unconscious since the accident, unable to walk or even move. So how had Jimmy gotten this key? And what had he meant by what's inside? Clinton started his truck, his grief beginning to crystallize into something else entirely. For the first time since the accident, he felt the familiar stirring of his predatory instincts, the same instincts that had built his empire and destroyed his enemies. Someone was going to pay for what happened to Jimmy, and this key was going to show him who. Chapter 2. Unlocking the Truth. 3 days after Jimmy's funeral, a modest affair attended only by Clinton, his foreman Jerry Atkinson, and Dr. Reynolds. Clinton stood in the lobby of First National Bank, the brass key heavy in his pocket. He'd spent sleepless nights visiting every bank, post office, and storage facility in 3 counties, looking for box number 247. Mr. Garrett, the bank manager, Jeffrey Stokes, approached with obvious nervousness. Jeffrey had been at the funeral, one of the few who'd known Jimmy personally. I heard about the key. Box 247 has been paid for through a trust, one set up in Jimmy's name. Clinton's blood chilled. My 8-year-old son set up a trust. No, sir. Someone else did, using Jimmy's name. The account was opened 6 months ago. Jeffrey led Clinton down to the vault, his hands shaking as he inserted his master key alongside Clinton's. Mr. Garrett, whatever's in here, maybe you should have someone with you. Open it. The box slid out with a metallic scrape. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents and a small digital camera. Clinton's hands were steady as he opened the envelope, but what he found made his vision blur with rage. Photographs. Dozens of them. Andrea and Wade Knapp, a local real estate developer Clinton had considered a friend, in intimate poses dating back 8 months. But these weren't just affair photos. The timestamps showed something far more sinister. They'd been planning Jimmy's accident. Text message printouts revealed the horrible truth. Wade had been pressuring Andrea to leave Clinton for months, but she'd refused to give up her comfortable lifestyle. The solution they devised was elegant in its cruelty. Remove Jimmy from the equation, inherit Clinton's construction empire through Clinton's grief-induced breakdown or death, then eliminate Clinton himself. The kid's too attached to his daddy, read one of Andrea's messages. Clinton would never abandon him. We need a permanent solution. Wade's response chilled Clinton's blood. My guy can make it look like an accident. Brake failure on that steep hill by the quarry. Kid walks to school that way every day. The final document was a life insurance policy on Jimmy, one Clinton had never seen before. Andrea had taken out 6 months ago, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. $2 million. Clinton's hands crumpled the papers as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. Andrea and Wade hadn't just planned to kill Jimmy. They'd plotted to murder Clinton too, making it look like a grief-stricken suicide after losing his son. The life insurance money would fund their new life together. But how had Jimmy known? How had an 8-year-old boy discovered his mother's plan to murder him? The digital camera held the answer. Clinton scrolled through dozens of photos Jimmy had taken in secret. Images of his mother and Wade together, screenshots of text messages Jimmy had photographed from Andrea's phone, even audio recordings the clever boy had made using the camera's voice memo function. The final recording was time-stamped 2 days before the accident. Jimmy's small voice whispered into the camera, "Mom and Uncle Wade are going to hurt me. They think I don't know, but I heard them. Mom said she needs me gone so she can have all of Daddy's money. If something happens to me, Daddy, Use this to make them pay. I love you." Clinton's vision turned red. His son, his brilliant, brave son, had known he was going to die and had spent his final days gathering evidence to protect his father. Jimmy had somehow managed to hide the key and the safety deposit box from everyone, even while knowing his mother planned to murder him. The boy had died not just protecting Clinton, but arming him for war. Clinton carefully photographed every document with his phone, then sealed the originals back in the safety deposit box. He learned long ago that evidence was worthless if it could be destroyed. But more importantly, he learned that the best revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about making the guilty destroy themselves. Leaving the bank, Clinton drove to the construction site where Jerry Atkinson was overseeing a new apartment complex. Jerry had been with Garrett Construction for 15 years, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to build instead of destroy. "Boss," Jerry approached, concern etched on his weathered face. "How you holding up?" Clinton handed Jerry the phone, letting him scroll through the evidence. Jerry's expression grew darker with each image, his military bearing returning as he processed what he was seeing. "Jesus Christ, Clinton. They killed Jimmy for insurance money. Worse than that." Clinton's voice was deadly calm. "They plan to kill me too. Make it look like suicide from grief." Jerry handed back the phone, his jaw set. "What do you need me to do?" "I need to know everything about Wade Knapp. Everything. His business, his family, his weaknesses. And I need to know where Andrea is hiding." Jerry nodded. "I've got contacts from the Corps. They can find anyone, dig up anything." "Good. But Jerry," Clinton's gray eyes were like winter steel. "This doesn't end with exposing them. This doesn't end with prison or lawsuits. They murder my son. They're going to pay in ways that'll make them beg for death." That evening, Clinton sat in Jimmy's room, surrounded by his son's drawings and school projects. On the desk was Jimmy's latest art assignment, a family portrait showing Clinton and Jimmy fishing together. Andrea was nowhere in the picture. Even in his child's art, Jimmy had known the truth about his mother. Clinton opened his laptop and began researching Wade Knapp's business empire. Wade owned 3 apartment complexes, a small shopping center, and had been aggressively expanding his real estate holdings. More importantly, Wade was leveraged to the hilt, owing money to some very unpleasant people. A plan began forming in Clinton's mind, not just for revenge, but for complete and utter destruction. Andrea and Wade had killed Jimmy for money and freedom. Clinton would take both from them, piece by piece, until they had nothing left but the knowledge of what they'd done. And then he'd take their lives, just as they'd taken his son's. His phone rang. Jerry's name appeared on the screen. "Found them," Jerry said without preamble. "Wade's at a lake house about 2 hours north. Neighbors say a redhead moved in last week. Expensive car in the driveway. Lights on every night." Clinton smiled for the first time since Jimmy's death. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Perfect. Tomorrow, we start making them pay." Chapter 3, Building the Trap. Clinton spent the next morning in his office, but not conducting business as usual. Instead, he was orchestrating the systematic destruction of 2 people who believed they were clever enough to murder a child and get away with it. His first call was to Marcus Reed, a private investigator who'd worked several insurance fraud cases for Garrett Construction. Marcus was expensive, discreet, and most importantly, had contacts in some very dark places. "I need everything on Wade Knapp," Clinton told him. "Financial records, business dealings, personal habits, enemies. Everything. How deep you want me to dig?" "All the way to China." "And Marcus?" "I need to know who he owes money to. The kind of people who don't accept late payments." His second call was to Saul Perez, a lawyer who specialized in the kinds of legal problems that traditional attorneys wouldn't touch. Saul had helped Clinton navigate some gray areas in the construction business over the years, and he understood that sometimes justice required creativity. "I need Wade Knapp's business holdings tied up in legal knots," Clinton explained. "Environmental violations, permit issues, building code problems. I don't care what you have to file or who you have to pay off. I want his cash flow strangled." By noon, Clinton had set a dozen wheels in motion. But the call that mattered most came at 1:47 p.m. "Boss." Jerry's voice was tight with excitement. You need to see this. Clinton drove to Jerry's apartment, a modest place that reflected the foreman's practical nature. Jerry had been busy since their conversation, using his military connections to dig into Wade Knapp's background. Wade's got problems, Jerry said, spreading photographs across his kitchen table. Big ones. He owes $800,000 to some casino interests in Atlantic City. The kind that break legs first and ask questions later. The photos showed Wade meeting with two men in expensive suits outside a restaurant. Even from a distance, their body language screamed danger. Vincent Caruso and his nephew Tony, Jerry continued. They run book for the Torino family. Wade's been making payments, but barely. Word is he's got maybe 2 weeks before they decide he's more valuable as an example than as a debtor. Clinton studied the photographs, his builder's mind seeing the foundation of Wade's destruction. What else? Andrea's spending money like water. Expensive clothes, jewelry, spa treatments. She's burning through cash faster than Wade can steal it. And get this, she's been calling her sister in Miami, talking about starting over somewhere warm. She's planning to run. Gets better. Wade doesn't know. He thinks they're building a life together here. But Andrea is already looking at one-way plane tickets. Clinton felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Andrea and Wade's greed would be their downfall, but not before he helped things along. I need you to make contact with these casino people, Clinton said. Let them know Wade's come into some money recently. Insurance money. Maybe suggest they ask him about it. Jerry grinned wolfishly. You want them to squeeze him? I want them to break him. But not yet. First, we're going to have some fun. That afternoon, Clinton drove to Knapp Developments, Wade's real estate office in a converted Victorian mansion downtown. Wade's secretary, a young woman named Melanie North, looked nervous as Clinton entered. Mr. Garrett, she stammered. I'm so sorry about Jimmy. Mr. Knapp said to tell you he's not available today. Clinton smiled pleasantly. That's fine, Melanie. I'm not here to see Wade. I'm here to see you. Melanie's confusion was obvious. Clinton had always been polite during business dealings, but there was something different about him now, something that made her instinctively step back. I understand you've been helping Wade with some special projects lately, Clinton continued. Paperwork that required discretion. Melanie's face went pale. Clinton knew from Marcus Reed's preliminary report that she'd been the one to help Wade set up the fake trust fund for Jimmy's safety deposit box. She probably thought it was some kind of surprise gift. I don't know what you mean. Clinton placed a manila envelope on her desk. These are photos of you notarizing documents for a trust fund in my dead son's name. Documents you never reported to the proper authorities. Melanie opened the envelope with shaking hands. The photos were clear. Marcus Reed was very good at his job. I can have you arrested for fraud, Clinton said conversationally. Falsifying legal documents involving a minor. That's a felony, Melanie. Or what? Or you can help me with a project. Something that will ensure Wade Knapp gets exactly what he deserves. Melanie stared at the photos, her career and freedom hanging in the balance. What kind of project? Clinton leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The kind where you keep your job, your freedom, and your conscience clean. All you have to do is make sure Wade receives certain phone calls and documents over the next few days. Can you do that? Melanie nodded frantically. She was young, scared, and had no idea she'd been helping a murderer. Clinton felt no guilt about using her fear. She'd unwittingly helped kill Jimmy, and now she'd help avenge him. Good. Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive a package. Inside will be photocopies of insurance documents and a phone number. You'll tell Wade that an insurance investigator called asking about Jimmy's policy. The investigator wants to meet with him personally. But there's no insurance investigator, is there? Clinton's smile was arctic. No, Melanie, there isn't. That evening, Clinton sat in his truck across from Wade's lake house, watching through binoculars as Wade and Andrea played house. They were grilling steaks on the deck, Andrea wearing a dress that cost more than most people made in a month. They looked happy, carefree, like a couple celebrating their good fortune. They had no idea their world was about to collapse. Clinton's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Reed. Wade's been skimming from his rental properties to pay the casino debt. Property management company is already suspicious. One phone call from the right person and they'll audit everything. Another text from Saul Perez. Filed environmental violation reports on all 3 of Wade's apartment complexes. Health Department is scheduling surprise inspections tomorrow. Also triggered IRS audit based on anonymous tip about unreported rental income. The trap was set. Over the next week, Wade would face challenges from every direction: legal, financial, and personal. The pressure would build until he made a mistake, and when he did, Clinton would be waiting. But the real beauty of Clinton's plan wasn't just Wade's destruction. It was the fact that Andrea and Wade would turn on each other when the pressure mounted. Their greed and selfishness, the very traits that had led them to murder Jimmy, would become the weapons Clinton used to destroy them. As Clinton drove home, he passed the hill where Jimmy's accident had occurred. Someone had left flowers by the guardrail. Clinton stopped and added his own, a small construction toy truck, the kind Jimmy had loved to play with. "Almost time, buddy," he whispered. "Daddy's going to make them pay for what they did to you." The wind picked up, rustling the flowers, and for a moment Clinton could swear he heard his son's voice in the breeze. "I love you, Daddy. Make them hurt." Clinton smiled grimly. He'd made a lot of promises in his life, but this was one he intended to keep. Chapter 4. The Pressure Builds. Wade Knapp's world began crumbling at exactly 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. He was sitting in his office, sipping coffee and reviewing rental income reports, when Melanie burst through his door without knocking. "Mr. Knapp, there's a problem," she said, her voice shaking. "The health department is here. They want to inspect all 3 apartment complexes. They said it's an emergency investigation based on anonymous complaints about code violations." Wade's coffee mug hit the floor, shattering into pieces. "What kind of complaints?" "Mold, faulty wiring, inadequate heating systems. They have warrants." Before Wade could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed the property management company that handled his rental collections. "Wade, we need to talk," came the voice of Patricia Manning, the company's chief financial officer. "There are discrepancies in your accounts. Significant ones." Wade's hand tightened on the phone. Over the past 8 months, he'd been skimming rental payments to cover his gambling debts and fund his lifestyle with Andrea. He'd been careful, taking small amounts from different properties, but apparently not careful enough. "I can explain. The police are on their way to your office," Patricia interrupted. "Don't leave town." The line went dead. Wade stared at his phone, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not now, when he and Andrea were so close to starting their new life together. His phone rang again. This time, the number was unfamiliar. "Wade Knapp." The voice was gravelly, with a distinct Brooklyn accent. "Yeah, who's this?" "Vincent Caruso. I think you know why I'm calling." Wade's blood turned to ice. Vincent Caruso was the casino enforcer he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Their last conversation had ended with Vincent promising to visit Wade if the next payment was late. "Vincent, I can explain. I've got the money. You better. All of it. 800 grand, plus the 20% interest we discussed. You got 48 hours. 48 hours? That's impossible. Then you better get creative. Because after 48 hours, my nephew Tony starts paying visits to people you care about. Starting with that redhead you've been shacking up with." The line went dead, leaving Wade staring at his phone in horror. In the span of 10 minutes, his entire world had collapsed. The health department was shutting down his properties, the police were investigating his finances, and the mob was threatening to kill Andrea. Wade grabbed his car keys and raced toward the lake house. He had to warn Andrea, had to figure out how they were going to get out of this mess. But as he drove, his phone kept ringing. The IRS, his insurance company, the Environmental Protection Agency. It was like everyone had decided to investigate Wade Knapp on the same day. Meanwhile, Clinton Garrett sat in his office, fielding updates from his team with grim satisfaction. Marcus Reed called first. "The health department found exactly what we planted," Marcus reported. "Mold samples in the ventilation systems, faulty wiring in the utility rooms, documentation of inadequate heating repairs. Wade's apartment complexes will be condemned by Friday." Jerry called 20 minutes later. "Vincent Caruso is pissed. His boy Tony just drove by Wade's office twice. They're not playing around. Saul Perez delivered the best news of all. The IRS audit turned up a gold mine. Wade's been underreporting rental income for 3 years. They're freezing his accounts pending investigation. He won't be able to access a dime. Clinton allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before making his next call. He dialed the lake house, knowing Wade would be racing there in a panic. Andrea answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hello. Andrea, it's Clinton." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Andrea finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Clinton, I didn't expect to hear from you. I imagine not, especially since you've been so busy lately. New house, new lifestyle, new boyfriend." Another pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." Clinton's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. "I'm talking about Wade Knapp, Andrea. I'm talking about the insurance policy you took out on our son. I'm talking about the text messages planning Jimmy's murder." The phone slipped from Andrea's hand, clattering to the floor. When she picked it up, Clinton could hear her breathing heavily. "You don't have any proof of anything," she whispered. "Actually, I have quite a bit of proof. Jimmy made sure of that before you killed him. Jimmy was 8 years old. He didn't know anything. Our son was brilliant, Andrea. Much smarter than you gave him credit for. He knew you were planning to murder him, and he spent his last days making sure you'd pay for it." Andrea's voice cracked. "You're lying. Safety deposit box 247 at First National Bank. Your loving son left me quite a collection of evidence. Photos, text messages, audio recordings. Everything I need to put you and Wade on death row." The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted their conversation. Through the lake house windows, Andrea could see Wade's BMW speeding up the gravel drive, dust clouds billowing behind it. "Looks like Wade's coming home," Clinton observed, though he was miles away. "You might want to ask him about his conversation with Vincent Caruso, or the police investigation into his embezzlement, or the IRS audit. It's been quite a day for your boyfriend." The line went dead just as Wade burst through the front door, his face pale and his clothes disheveled. "Andrea, we have to leave. Now, pack everything. We're getting out of here tonight." Andrea stared at him, Clinton's words echoing in her mind. "What happened?" "Everything's falling apart. The cops, the IRS, the health department. Someone's orchestrating this, making it all happen at once." "Clinton knows," Andrea whispered. "He called. He knows about Jimmy, about us, about everything." Wade's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "We're dead. Vincent Caruso wants 800 grand in 2 days, or he kills us both. The cops want me for embezzlement. And if Clinton has evidence about Jimmy..." "We run," Andrea said, her voice gaining strength. "Tonight, we take what cash we have and disappear." "With what money?" Wade laughed bitterly. "My accounts are frozen. The properties are condemned. About maybe 5,000 in cash, and that won't get us out of the state, let alone the country." Andrea walked to the window, staring out at the lake. In the distance, she could see a lone fisherman in a small boat, too far away to make out clearly. Something about the figure seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "Some way to fix this." Wade stood up, pacing frantically. "The only thing that would save us is if Clinton dies before he can give that evidence to the police. But we already tried that once, and look how it turned out. Maybe we don't have to kill him," Andrea said slowly. "Maybe we just have to convince him to keep quiet." "Ow!" Andrea turned from the window, her expression calculating. "Clinton loved Jimmy more than anything. What if we told him that we could bring Jimmy back?" Wade stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "There's a doctor in Switzerland. Experimental procedures. If we could convince Clinton that Jimmy's death wasn't permanent, that there was a chance to save him." "You're insane. Jimmy's dead. We made sure of that." "But Clinton doesn't know how much we know about medicine," Andrea continued, her voice growing excited. "We could create fake documents, forge medical reports, make him believe there's hope." Wade shook his head. "It'll never work. Clinton's too smart for that. Clinton's grieving. Grieving people believe what they want to believe." As they talked, neither of them noticed the fishermen on the lake had moved closer to shore. If they had looked carefully, they might have recognized Clinton Garrett, sitting patiently in his small boat, listening to every word through the long-range listening device pointed at their window. Clinton smiled grimly as he recorded their conversation. They were planning another deception, another manipulation. But this time, he'd be ready for them. This time, they'd walk straight into his trap. Chapter 5. The Net Closes. The next morning, Clinton sat in his office reviewing the audio recording from the lake house when Jerry knocked on his door. "Boss, we got company," Jerry said, stepping aside to reveal Vincent Caruso and his nephew Tony. Vincent was exactly what Clinton had expected. A man in his 50s with silver hair, expensive clothes, and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of violence. Tony was younger, broader, with the look of someone who enjoyed his work a little too much. "Mr. Garrett," Vincent said, settling into the chair across from Clinton's desk. "I understand you, and I have a mutual interest in Wade Knapp." Clinton leaned back in his chair, studying the two men. "What kind of interest?" "The kind where he owes me $800,000, and you want him to suffer for personal reasons." Vincent's smile was razor thin. "My sources tell me you've been pressuring Mr. Knapp lately." "Your sources are well-informed." Tony spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. "We heard about your kid. That's rough. You want revenge. We want our money. Maybe we can help each other." Clinton had been expecting this conversation. When you stirred up someone's life the way he'd been stirring up Wade's, other interested parties inevitably noticed. "What are you proposing?" Vincent pulled out a manila folder, spreading photographs across Clinton's desk. They showed Wade and Andrea at the lake house, shopping, dining out. The surveillance was professional quality. "Wade thinks he's going to run," Vincent said. "Pack up his girlfriend and disappear. But running requires money, and thanks to your efforts, Wade's broke. So desperate people do desperate things. Wade's going to try something stupid to get money fast. When he does, we want to be there." Clinton studied the photographs, his mind working. "What do you want from me?" "Information. You seem to know Wade's moves before he makes them. We want to know when and where he's going to surface next." Tony leaned forward. "Plus, we heard he got evidence about your kid's death. Evidence that could put Wade away forever." "I might. We don't want Wade in prison," Vincent said bluntly. "We want him alive and paying what he owes. But if you're planning to kill him..." He shrugged. "We want our money first." Clinton made a decision that would have surprised his old self, the man he'd been before Jimmy's murder. "I'm not planning to kill Wade." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm planning to destroy him. Completely. Take everything he values, everyone he loves, every hope he has for the future. Death would be mercy." Tony laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "I like this guy. Here's what I propose," Clinton continued. "You get your money. I get my revenge. But we do it my way." Vincent considered this. "What's your way?" Clinton pulled out his phone, playing the audio recording from the lake house. Vincent and Tony listened to Andrea and Wade's plan to deceive Clinton about Jimmy's death, their voices growing darker with each word. "They're planning to manipulate a grieving father," Vincent said when the recording ended. "That's low, even for scumbags like them." "Which is why they're going to walk right into our trap," Clinton replied. "Wade needs money. You want your money. I want them to suffer. So we're going to give Wade a chance to get money, a chance that will destroy them both." Clinton outlined his plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its efficiency. Vincent and Tony would offer Wade a job, something that seemed like easy money but was actually a setup. Wade would jump at the opportunity, desperate to solve his financial problems. But the job would require him to betray Andrea, and Andrea's reaction would provide Clinton with the final piece of evidence he needed. "You want us to turn them against each other," Vincent said admiringly. "Beautiful. More than that, I want them to destroy each other. And when they're done, you get your money, Wade learns what real suffering feels like, and Andrea pays for murdering my son." That afternoon, Wade received a phone call that seemed like a gift from heaven. The caller identified himself as Marcus Torino, Vincent Caruso's cousin, with a business proposition. "I hear you're having some cash flow problems," Marcus said. "I might have a solution." They met at a restaurant downtown, far from Wade's usual haunts. Marcus was a thin man with nervous energy and the kind of expensive watch that suggested serious money. "I need someone to transport some merchandise," Marcus explained. "Nothing dangerous, just some items that need to move from point A to point B without attracting attention. One job, 50,000 cash. Wade's desperation made him ignore the obvious red flags. What kind of merchandise? The kind you don't ask questions about. You pick up a package in Philadelphia, drive it to Richmond, hand it over. 8 hours work, 50 grand. When? Tomorrow night. But there's a condition. Marcus leaned forward. You go alone. No girlfriends, no partners, no backup. This is a one-man job. Wade's mind raced. 50,000 would buy them time, maybe enough to disappear before Vincent Caruso's deadline expired. And it was just one drive, one night. I'll do it. Marcus smiled. Good. I'll call you tomorrow with the details. As Wade drove back to the lake house, he felt hope for the first time in days. Andrea would be thrilled. They could take the money and run, start over somewhere Vincent Caruso would never find them. But when he arrived at the lake house, Andrea was packing frantically. We have to leave tonight, she said without preamble. I've been thinking about what Clinton said. He has evidence, real evidence. We can't wait. I might have a solution, Wade said, explaining the job offer. Andrea stopped packing, her expression suspicious. 50,000 for one drive? Wade, that's obviously illegal. So what? We're already in deep trouble. What's one more crime? What if it's a setup? What if Clinton's behind this? Wade hadn't considered that possibility, but Andrea's paranoia was contagious. You think he'd work with the mob? I think he'd work with the devil himself to get revenge for Jimmy. They argued for hours, their stress and fear turning them against each other. Andrea insisted they flee immediately with what little money they had. Wade argued that 50,000 would give them real options, a real chance to escape. Fine, Andrea finally said. Take your mobster job, but I'm not waiting around to see if it's a trap. What are you talking about? I'm leaving tonight, with or without you. Wade stared at her, seeing his future crumbling. You're abandoning me? I'm saving myself. Something you should have thought about before you borrowed money from killers. Neither of them noticed the small electronic device that had been planted in their living room during their argument, or the fact that every word was being transmitted to a receiver in Clinton Garrett's truck, parked a half-mile away. Clinton listened to their fight with cold satisfaction. The pressure was working exactly as he'd planned. Wade and Andrea were turning on each other, their selfishness and greed poisoning the relationship they'd murdered Jimmy to protect. Tomorrow night, Wade would drive to Philadelphia to pick up a package that didn't exist, walking into a trap that would finish him forever. And Andrea would run, thinking she was escaping, only to find that Clinton had planned for that possibility too. Phase 1 of their destruction was complete. Now came the real pain. Chapter 6, The Breaking Point. Wade drove toward Philadelphia the next evening with $50,000 dancing in his mind and dread growing in his stomach. Andrea had left that morning without a goodbye, taking her expensive clothes and jewelry, but leaving behind any pretense of love or loyalty. The meeting point was a warehouse in North Philadelphia, the kind of industrial wasteland where bad things happen to naive people. Wade's hands shook as he pulled into the empty parking lot, his headlights cutting through the darkness. A man emerged from the shadows. Not Marcus Torino, but Tony Caruso. Wade's blood turned to ice as he recognized Vincent's nephew. Get out of the car, Wade. Wade considered running, but Tony's hand rested casually on his jacket, where the outline of a gun was visible. Wade climbed out slowly, his legs unsteady. Where's Marcus? He's supposed to give me the package. Tony laughed. There is no package, you idiot. And there is no Marcus Torino. You just drove 3 hours to your own execution. More men emerged from the warehouse. 4 of them, all with the predatory look of career criminals. Wade was surrounded, alone, and completely helpless. Wait, Wade stammered. I can get you money. All of it. Just give me more time. Time's up, Tony said. But before we end this, my uncle wants to have a conversation with you. Vincent Caruso stepped out of a black sedan, his expression calm, but his eyes promising violence. Wade, you look terrible. Vincent, please. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. But first, I want you to understand something. Vincent nodded toward the warehouse. Your girlfriend isn't as smart as she thinks she is. 2 more men emerged from the building, dragging a struggling figure between them. Andrea, her expensive clothes torn and her perfect makeup smeared with tears. "Wade," she screamed. "Help me." Wade's world tilted. "How did you—" "She left this morning. We've been watching both of you for days," Vincent explained conversationally. "When Andrea tried to run, we were ready. Picked her up at the airport trying to board a plane to Miami." Tony grinned. She had a suitcase full of jewelry and about 30 grand in cash. Nice little nest egg she was planning to start over with. Wade stared at Andrea, understanding flooding through him. "You were leaving me. Permanently." "Wait, no. I was going to send for you once it was safe." "Bullshit." Wade's grief and fear crystallized into rage. "You were going to disappear and leave me to die." Vincent watched their confrontation with professional interest. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Desperate people turning on each other, making mistakes that could be exploited. "Here's what's going to happen," Vincent announced. "You two are going to settle your debts. All of them. To me, and to someone else who has an interest in your situation." A new vehicle pulled into the parking lot. Clinton Garrett's pickup truck. Wade and Andrea watched in horror as Clinton climbed out, carrying a manila folder and wearing an expression that promised terrible things. "Clinton," Andrea whispered. "How did you find you? I never lost you." Clinton's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I've been watching every move you've made since the day you abandoned our dying son." Vincent stepped back, giving Clinton space. This had been their deal. Vincent would corner Wade and Andrea, and Clinton would have his confrontation. "You killed Jimmy for insurance money," Clinton continued, opening the folder. $2 million that you thought would fund your new life together. But you made one mistake. "What mistake?" Wade demanded. Clinton smiled coldly. "You underestimated my son. Jimmy knew what you were planning. He spent his last days gathering evidence against you." Clinton pulled out photographs, audio transcripts, insurance documents. Every text message planning his murder. Every meeting you had. Every cruel thing you said about a child you were planning to kill. Andrea's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees in the gravel, sobbing. "We didn't mean for it to happen like that." "You meant for it to happen exactly like that," Clinton replied. "You researched the best way to kill a child and make it look accidental. You took out an insurance policy on his life. You planned to murder me after my grief made me convenient to eliminate." Wade backed away, but Tony's men blocked his escape. "Clinton, we can work something out. The insurance money has been donated to a children's hospital in Jimmy's name." Clinton interrupted. "Every penny. You killed my son for nothing." Vincent cleared his throat. "Speaking of money, Wade still owes me $800,000, plus interest." Clinton reached into his jacket, pulling out a cashier's check. "Wade's debt to you is now paid in full." Vincent examined the check, his eyebrows rising. "This is for $1.2 million. The extra is for your patience and cooperation." Wade stared in shock. "You paid my debt? Why?" Clinton's smile was arctic. "Because I don't want you dead quickly. I want you alive to suffer for what you did to Jimmy." Vincent pocketed the check. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Garrett. Wade, Andrea, consider yourselves very lucky. And very stupid." Vincent and his men climbed into their vehicles and drove away, leaving Wade and Andrea alone with Clinton in the empty lot. The silence stretched for long minutes, broken only by Andrea's sobbing. "What happens now?" Wade finally asked. "Now you learn what it feels like to lose everything," Clinton replied. "Your business is destroyed. Your properties are condemned. Your girlfriend tried to abandon you. Your reputation is ruined. The police are investigating your embezzlement. The IRS has frozen your assets." But Vincent said, "Vincent got his money. You get to live with the knowledge that you murdered an innocent child and gained nothing from it. No money, no freedom, no love, no future." Clinton walked back toward his truck, then paused. "Oh, and Wade, the police will receive copies of Jimmy's evidence tomorrow morning. Andrea's too. You'll both be arrested for first-degree murder." Andrea looked up from the gravel, her makeup completely destroyed. "Clinton, please. We can make this right somehow." "Make it right." Clinton's voice dropped to a whisper. "You want to make murdering my son right? We could do charity work. Help other children. Show that we're sorry." Clinton stared at her for a long moment, And for just an instant, Andrea thought she saw a flicker of something other than hatred in his eyes. Then he spoke, and any hope she might have felt died instantly. "Jimmy left me one more message, Andrea. Want to hear it?" Without waiting for an answer, Clinton pulled out his phone and played an audio file. Jimmy's young voice filled the night air. "Daddy, if something happens to me, don't forgive them. They're going to say they're sorry, but they're not. They're just sorry they got caught. Make them pay for what they did. Make them hurt like they hurt us. I love you, Daddy. Get them." The recording ended. Andrea and Wade stared at Clinton, finally understanding that there would be no mercy, no forgiveness, no second chances. "Tomorrow, you'll be arrested," Clinton said. "You'll spend the rest of your lives in prison, assuming you survive that long. Child killers don't do well in general population." Clinton climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Wade and Andrea stranded in the dark parking lot with no money, no transportation, and no hope. Their nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Hammer Falls. The arrest came at dawn, exactly as Clinton had promised. Wade was taken from a cheap motel room where he'd spent the night, while Andrea was found sleeping in her car outside a gas station, having nowhere else to go after their confrontation in the parking lot. The media coverage was immediate and brutal. Local mother and lover charged Ian's son's murder screamed the headlines, accompanied by photos of Jimmy smiling at a school event and crime scene photos from the accident that investigators now revealed had been carefully orchestrated. Clinton watched the news coverage from his office, Jerry beside him with a cup of coffee and a satisfied expression. "DA says they're going for the death penalty," Jerry reported. "Both of them. Evidence is overwhelming." "Good." Clinton's voice was flat, emotionless. The rage that had sustained him through weeks of planning had crystallized into cold satisfaction. His phone rang. The caller ID showed the number for the county jail. "Mr. Garrett?" The voice was broken, desperate. "It's Andrea. They let me make one phone call, and I had to try." "What do you want, Andrea?" "Clinton, please. I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but I'm begging you. There has to be some way we can work this out." Clinton leaned back in his chair, considering. "Work what out?" "I'll confess. I'll tell them everything, take full responsibility. I'll say Wade didn't know anything about the plan. Just, please don't let them execute me." "Why would I care if they execute you?" Because I know you're not a killer. You're angry, and you should be, but you're not like us. You wouldn't really want someone to die." Clinton was quiet for so long that Andrea thought the call had been disconnected. "Andrea," he finally said, "you killed my son. You murdered an 8-year-old boy for money. You told me to bury him cheaply and walked away while he was dying." "I know, and I'm not finished." Clinton's voice cut through her words like a blade. "You want to know what kind of man I am? I'm the kind who spent 3 weeks systematically destroying your life and your boyfriend's life before having you arrested. I'm the kind who paid off your mob debt just to keep you alive long enough to suffer properly." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when they strap you to that execution table, I'll be in the front row. And when they ask if you have any last words, I hope you remember Jimmy's face." The line went dead. Andrea stared at the phone, finally understanding the complete hopelessness of her situation. But Clinton wasn't finished with his revenge. That afternoon, he received a visitor he'd been expecting, Andrea's sister, Rochelle Levy, who'd driven up from Miami after hearing about the arrests. Rochelle was younger than Andrea, with the same auburn hair, but none of the hardness that had developed in her sister over the years. She sat across from Clinton in his office, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Garrett, I'm so sorry about Jimmy. I love that little boy like he was my own nephew." Clinton studied her, seeing genuine grief in her eyes. "What do you want, Rochelle? I want to understand how my sister could do something so horrible. Andrea wasn't always like this. She used to be kind, caring. Something changed her. Greed changed her. Maybe, but there's something else." Rochelle hesitated, then pulled out a manila envelope. "I found this in Andrea's apartment in Miami. She'd been planning to move down there permanently." Clinton opened the envelope, finding documents that made his blood run cold. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, prescription receipts. Andrea had been seeing a therapist for months, complaining of intrusive thoughts about harming her family. She's been planning this for almost a year, Rochelle whispered. The therapist's notes mention her talking about removing obstacles to her happiness. Clinton read through the documents, his anger reaching new heights. Andrea hadn't just decided to kill Jimmy on impulse. She'd been fantasizing about murdering her own son for months. Why are you showing me this? Because I think there's more. I think Andrea might have. Rochelle's voice broke. I think she might have hurt other children. The implications hit Clinton like a physical blow. What other children? Andrea worked at a daycare center before she married you. 3 children died of accidents during the year she was there. The center was shut down, but no charges were ever filed. Clinton stared at the documents, pieces of a horrible puzzle falling into place. Jimmy hadn't been Andrea's first victim. He'd been a final step in a pattern of child murder that had gone undetected for years. I need copies of everything you have, Clinton said. Of course. But Mr. Garrett, what are you going to do with this information? Clinton's smile was terrible to behold. I'm going to make sure Andrea pays for every child she's ever hurt. That evening, Clinton met with the district attorney, providing the new evidence that transformed the case from a single murder charge to a potential serial killing investigation. The DA's office immediately began reviewing the deaths at the daycare center, and by morning, Andrea faced additional charges in the deaths of 3 more children. Wade, meanwhile, had been abandoned by his legal team when it became clear he couldn't pay their fees. Sitting in his jail cell, he'd had time to think about the complete destruction of his life. The man who'd once owned properties worth millions was now facing execution for a crime that had gained him nothing. His cellmate, a career criminal named Buddy Blake, was amused by Wade's situation. You killed a kid for money and didn't even get the money? Buddy laughed. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. I didn't know it would end like this, Wade protested. Of course you didn't. You're not a real criminal, just a stupid rich boy who thought he was smarter than everybody else. Wade's lawyer, overworked public defender named Jeffrey Stokes, visited him that afternoon with more bad news. The prosecution is offering a deal, Jeffrey said. Life without parole if you testify against Andrea. What kind of testimony? They want you to confirm that she was the mastermind, that she planned everything and manipulated you into going along with it. Wade considered this. Life in prison was better than execution, and Andrea had tried to abandon him anyway. What happens to her if I testify? She gets the death penalty for sure. Multiple counts of first-degree murder. Wade thought about Andrea's plan to run away to Miami, leaving him to face Vincent Caruso's wrath alone. He thought about her cold instructions to bury Jimmy cheaply. He thought about the years he'd wasted loving someone who'd never loved him back. I'll do it, he said. When Andrea learned of Wade's betrayal, she screamed so loudly that guards had to sedate her. Her own lawyer tried to negotiate a similar deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested. Andrea was the mastermind, the serial killer, the monster who'd murdered children for money and convenience. Clinton received updates on both cases from the DA's office, watching as his careful planning brought about the complete destruction of the people who'd killed his son. But even as justice moved forward, he found no satisfaction in their suffering. Nothing would bring Jimmy back. Nothing would undo the pain of losing his child. But at least the world would know that killing Jimmy Garrett had been the worst mistake Andrea and Wade could have made. Their punishment was just beginning. Chapter 8. No Mercy. 3 months later, Clinton sat in the courthouse as Wade Knapp took the witness stand to testify against Andrea. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case, but Wade's testimony would seal Andrea's fate. Wade looked broken. Prison had not been kind to him. His expensive clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit, his confident demeanor replaced with the haunted look of a man who'd lost everything. He avoided looking at Andrea as he was sworn in. Mr. Knapp, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Wade's voice was barely audible. Andrea and I were involved romantically for about 8 months before Jimmy's death. And during this relationship, did Mrs. Garrett ever discuss her feelings about her son? Wade glanced at Clinton, then quickly looked away. She said Jimmy was an obstacle, that Clinton would never leave him or let her take him away from his father. Did she suggest a solution to this problem? she said. Wade's voice broke. She said the only way we could be together was if Jimmy was gone permanently. Andrea's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Wade continued his devastating testimony, describing in detail how Andrea had researched ways to kill children, how she'd taken out the insurance policy, how she'd planned Clinton's death as well. She told me Clinton was weak, Wade said, that he'd probably kill himself from grief after losing Jimmy, making everything easier for us. Clinton listened to every word, his face impassive. But inside, his rage burned hotter with each revelation of Andrea's calculated cruelty. When the defense cross-examined Wade, they tried to paint him as the mastermind, manipulating Andrea's emotions for his own gain. But Wade's complete breakdown on the stand made it clear he was a weak man who'd been dominated by a predator. I know I deserve to die for what I did, Wade sobbed during redirect examination. But Andrea, she's not human. She planned to kill a child like other people plan a vacation. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Jimmy's hidden recordings, the insurance documents, the daycare center deaths, Wade's testimony. But the most damning evidence came from Andrea herself. Against her lawyer's advice, Andrea had insisted on testifying in her own defense. She took the stand wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, tried to project innocence and remorse. It was a catastrophic mistake. Mrs. Garrett, the prosecutor asked, "Do you love your son?" "Of course I loved Jimmy," Andrea replied, her voice carefully modulated. "Then why did you refer to burying him cheaply?" Andrea's composure cracked slightly. "I was in shock. People say things they don't mean when they're grieving." "Were you grieving, Mrs. Garrett? Or were you relieved?" "Objection. Sustained." The prosecutor shifted tactics. "Mrs. Garrett, how do you explain the insurance policy you took out on Jimmy's life?" "I was thinking about his future. College, medical emergencies. A $2 million policy on an 8-year-old. I wanted him protected." "Protected from what?" "The accident you were planning." "That's not. I never." The prosecutor played one of Jimmy's secret recordings. Andrea's voice filled the courtroom. "The kid's too attached to his daddy. Clinton would never abandon him. We need a permanent solution." Andrea stared at the speaker as her own words condemned her. She'd forgotten about that conversation, forgotten that Jimmy might have been listening. "That's taken out of context," she said weakly. "What context makes planning a child's murder acceptable, Mrs. Garrett?" Andrea's careful facade crumbled. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Wade was pushing me, threatening to leave if I didn't do something about Jimmy. So you decided to murder your son? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The accident was supposed to be quick, painless." The courtroom erupted. Andrea's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Andrea herself seemed to realize what she'd just admitted, her hand flying to her mouth. "You're confirming that you planned Jimmy's death?" the prosecutor pressed. "No. I mean, it wasn't murder. It was meant to look like an accident." "Because murder and accidental death are different things, Mrs. Garrett." Andrea broke down completely, sobbing and babbling about pressure and fear and Wade's manipulation. But her words only dug her grave deeper. Clinton watched his wife's complete destruction with cold satisfaction. This was what justice looked like, not just punishment, but the complete exposure of evil for what it was. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Jimmy Garrett. First-degree murder of 3 children at the daycare center. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. The penalty phase was even shorter. Andrea's death sentence was unanimous. Wade received life without parole in exchange for his testimony. But Clinton knew prison justice would likely be his real sentence. Child killers didn't survive long in general population. After the sentencing, Clinton stood outside the courthouse, facing a crowd of reporters. He'd avoided media attention throughout the trial, but now he had something to say. "My son Jimmy was 8 years old when his mother murdered him for money," he began, his voice carrying over the crowd. "He was brilliant, kind, and brave. In his final days, knowing he was going to die, he spent his time protecting me and gathering evidence to ensure his killers would be caught." The reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling. Andrea Garrett and Wade Knapp thought they were smart enough to commit the perfect crime. They thought they could murder a child and get away with it. They were wrong. "Mr. Garrett," a reporter called out, "do you feel justice has been served?" Clinton was quiet for a long moment. "Justice would be having my son back. What we have is accountability. Andrea Garrett will die for her crimes, and Wade Knapp will spend the rest of his life remembering what it cost him to murder an innocent child. Do you feel any sympathy for them?" Clinton's expression hardened. "I feel exactly as much sympathy for them as they felt for Jimmy when they killed him. None." As Clinton walked away from the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. "It's over, boss. You got them." But Clinton knew it wasn't over. It would never be over. Jimmy was still dead, and no amount of revenge could change that. Still, his son could rest knowing that his killers had paid the ultimate price for their evil. That would have to be enough. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. 2 years after the trial, Clinton stood in the observation room of the state prison, watching through bulletproof glass as Andrea Garrett was prepared for execution. She'd exhausted all her appeals, fired and hired multiple lawyers, and finally accepted that her death was inevitable. Clinton had been offered the chance to speak with Andrea before her execution. He declined. There was nothing she could say that would matter, and nothing he wanted to hear from her. Wade Knapp had been murdered in prison 18 months earlier, exactly as Clinton had predicted. A group of inmates had learned about his crimes and delivered their own form of justice. Clinton felt no satisfaction at the news. It was simply the natural consequence of Wade's choices. As the execution began, Clinton thought about Jimmy. His son would have been 10 years old now, probably playing Little League baseball or building elaborate constructions with his toy trucks. Instead, Jimmy existed only in memories and in the evidence that had brought his killers to justice. The warden approached Clinton as the process neared its end. "She asked if you had any final words for her," he said quietly. Clinton watched Andrea's still form through the glass. "Tell her Jimmy says hello." When it was over, Clinton drove to the cemetery where Jimmy was buried. The headstone was simple granite with an inscription that captured everything important. James Jimmy Garrett, beloved son, hero, protector. Clinton sat beside the grave as the sun set, finally allowing himself to feel something other than rage for the first time in 2 years. "It's done, buddy," he said quietly. "They can't hurt anyone else now." The wind rustled through the trees, and Clinton could almost imagine he heard Jimmy's voice. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for keeping your promise." Clinton had kept many promises in his life, but this was the one that mattered most. Justice for Jimmy, accountability for his killers, and the certainty that their evil had been exposed and punished. He stayed at the cemetery until full darkness fell, talking to his son about construction projects and business deals, about the fishing trips they'd never take and the baseball games they'd never attend. When he finally left, Clinton felt something he hadn't experienced since Jimmy's death. Peace. Not happiness. That might never return completely. But peace in knowing that he'd honored his son's memory and ensured that Jimmy's sacrifice had not been in vain. The boy who died protecting his father had, in the end, protected countless other children by ensuring his killers could never harm again. That was Jimmy's real legacy, and it was enough. 3 months later, Clinton received a letter from a woman named Sally Chamberlain, whose daughter had been one of Andrea's victims at the daycare center. Sally thanked Clinton for never giving up, for pursuing justice when the police had failed her family years earlier. "Because of your son's courage and your determination," Sally wrote, "my daughter's death finally has meaning. Andrea can never hurt another child, and other families won't suffer what we've suffered." Clinton kept the letter in his desk drawer, along with dozens of others from families who'd found closure through Jimmy's case. His son's death had been a tragedy, but Jimmy's final act of courage had saved other children and brought peace to other parents. It wasn't the life Clinton had planned, but it was a purpose worth living for. Every morning, he visited Jimmy's grave before work. Every evening, he told his son about his day. And every night, he went to sleep knowing that justice had been served and evil had been punished. Jimmy Garrett was gone, but his legacy lived on in every child who would never meet Andrea Garrett, in every family that would never know that particular kind of evil. That was how a hero's story really ended. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Not with hatred, but with the knowledge that love had triumphed over evil, even in death. Clinton Garrett had kept his promise to his son, and in doing so, he discovered that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's ensuring they can never harm the innocent again. Jimmy would have been proud. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.